From Unity Church of Christianity in Houston, Texas, this is The Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational Christian church providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress with the Reverend Howard Caesar.
There was a pastor, actually, I guess, that first quoted this. He was from First Presbyterian Church in Arizona. And anyway, he said the best prayer that he had ever heard was, "Dear Lord, please make me the kind of person my dog thinks I am." So those of you who have pets know what that's like. Anyway, today we continue in our series called Spiritual Values to Live By. This is part 3. And Unity Church, as you know, has formulated purpose, vision, values as other organizations, but they designed it, as many others perhaps, that it is appropriate for not only the organization but the individual that it seeks to serve. And our focus has been on purpose and values, because really your vision may be different than the ministry's vision in a sense, and we have worked out a vision that we like to share as well. But anyway, our purpose, and if we can have this on the screens to quickly go over, is who we are being in the world, And our purpose then is to be an empowering force for spiritual evolution, creating conscious lives in an awakened world. And we crafted these probably 12, 14 years ago, something like that. We reworked them. So basically it all starts with this question, who we are being in the world, and basically who we want to be in the world. You're living this life, and it's a gift, and you need to decide who you are, how you want to show up. That's very powerful as a spiritual being. And so the answer to that question, really, is you want to be an empowering force. You want to be an empowering force for good, for spiritual evolution, as opposed to a disempowering force. You want to be evolving as opposed to devolving. You want to be conscious, awake, and aware as opposed to sleeping your way through this life. And you want to be a contribution. You want to make a contribution to the awakened world by virtue of the steps and the progress that you make in your spiritual evolution. You become more of a light in this world, and that's what we're called to do. So we're talking about values, and we said that a value is something that we hold dear to us in our progress on the spiritual path, on our spiritual journey. And that basically it's something that we stand for, and it's something we seek to live from. We build it into our consciousness. It is a spiritual compass oftentimes. If you have values, it helps you make decisions more quickly and more easily. And so it's the ideals that we keep in front of us and we devote our life to, really, because we believe in them. They're pure and they're whole, and so we carry them forward. Now, our first value that the church has established for itself and for you as individuals that is on oneness. It's about oneness. And if we can have that up on the screens to go over that swiftly. And our value states the way we live from our oneness with God and each other and experience the interconnectedness of all life. We covered that very thoroughly, went over all the massive ways in which Jesus had references to oneness, its importance, its significance. The important thing that we want you to get is the enemy is not another person. The enemy is not circumstances, things out there. The enemy basically is a state of consciousness called separation. It's a state of consciousness in which you are separated from who you are, separated from your God, separated from your master teacher, Jesus Christ, separated from nature, all of creation, all of that. So it's separation, it's a disconnection. And so that's the enemy, and you want to bring yourself back to a connection, an importance of oneness. So last week in part 2, we covered the second value, and which is about spiritual principles, very important, something that you have to apply, want to be in harmony with. And so if we can put on the screens that second value, and the way it's stated is, we uplift all people in their spiritual growth as we apply the principles taught by Jesus the Christ, and we embrace the universal truths of other faith traditions. So the emphasis here is on upliftment and inspiration, lifting people's consciousness, awakening them, if you will. By applying what? Spiritual principles. These principles are very important. And these are principles that were taught by Jesus Christ and others, of course, and that's why we say if they're universal, we apply them. And so we went over the truth that the universe basically is run by law and laws and principles. And we do not have a God that is a punishing God. But basically, if one is out of harmony with laws and principles and there's a misapplication or an ignorance of, there are consequences the same way that gravity, whether you're aware of it or not, if you fall from a high place, there are consequences. So you have to come in harmony and understand that there are laws and principles that will help move you forward and won't hold you back. And so we add also that a number of these truths and spiritual principles taught by Jesus the Christ are taught in a number of faith traditions. And they are universal, so we embrace these universal teachings. So in unity, it's more than a tolerance for other people or paths or traditions or religions, really. We embrace those things which, stated in various ways, contain the universal message of love, of oneness, of goodness. If it's there, we're not afraid to reference it, okay? And so here in Unity, we are clear that God spoke through Jesus. And we accept that God has spoken through others, before and after Jesus. God didn't stop talking suddenly, all right? And so we're not afraid to reference these others if they are in alignment with those universal principles. Today, we will present the third value, and this third value is about transformation. And we value the idea of transformation. We're all being transformed. And before we get into the actual wording of that value, you need to understand that the same way that a seed becomes a stem and a flower and a bloom, we all are in a process of transforming. Transformation happens all around in the universe, and nature sings the song of transformation. It should be no different for you or I in understanding that. We're not to be static. It's not about sameness. It's about motion. The whole universe is in motion. It is progressing, and so should we be. The word transformation itself literally means, we'll say that literally again, literally means going beyond form, going beyond form. Transformation. Okay, so transformation is about, really it involves transcending something. Something that has perhaps held you back, or where you've been, or what has limited you, was not your true self, was not your higher self. It's wanting to emerge, and so it is transcending, going beyond the form of old limiting thoughts, old limiting ideas, old limiting opinions and beliefs and biases and prejudices, emotions and behaviors, the whole works, all right? That's transformation. It involves a lot, and so we're not able to go into all of what we undergird that with to bring about that, you see, but spiritual principles were one of them. We talked about that last week. But it's basically going beyond lower states of consciousness into higher states of consciousness that involve a greater expression of love and peace and joy. And so we have to be realistic and realize also that our path to transformation is often through our mistakes. Who hasn't had a mistake here? Who hasn't made many mistakes? I have learned from my mistakes, and our mistakes are there really simply to recognize them, to learn from them, and to move on from them, okay? It's to correct and take new aim. Sin means, it's an archery term, you know, to aim again. And so who we are is very important to get to. There's a story about an old Cherokee who told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside of people. And he said, "My son, the battle is between two wolves inside of us all. And one is bad," he labeled. It has to do with anger and envy and jealousy and sorrow and regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, things of the ego. And then he said the other wolf is good, and it is joy, it's peace, it's love, it's hope, it's serenity, It's humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, faith. And the grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, well, which wolf wins? And the old Cherokee simply said, the one that you feed, the one that you feed. It's an old story, and some of you probably heard of it. And be careful not to judge, all those that got listed as bad, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. We all have these different emotions that move through us. So don't label yourself in any way. But it's just being willing to notice, and the point is, don't feed them. Don't feed that. When you notice and become aware, don't feed that. Begin to direct your energies elsewhere, beyond the guilt and the self-pity and these kinds of things. And so transformation is really about going then beyond the old limiting, lower consciousness ways of behavior, thought, what have you. Paul said, of course, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. So he was about transformation, he too. C.S. Lewis addressed this idea of transformation and evolution into higher states of consciousness. What he said is, it may be hard for an egg to turn into a bird. It would be a jolly sight harder for it to learn to fly while remaining an egg. We are like eggs at present. And you cannot go on indefinitely being just an ordinary egg. We must be hatched or go bad. And so this is the value of transformation. And so that value is stated this way, if we can have it up on our screens. We bring into full expression the divine idea that we are held to be in the mind of God through the expanding awareness of our spiritual identity. Let's say that again. It's a lot to take in. It's so very, very powerful. We bring into full expression the divine idea that we are held to be in the mind of God through the expanding awareness of our spiritual identity. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the divine idea that we are held to be in the mind of God, which we, through free will, have the opportunity either to bring into full expression or be working on that, or during our lifetime to kind of fall asleep, allow it to who we really are, the possibilities of what we're held to be in the mind of God, to lie dormant and unexpressed. We have the choice. We have free will. So what is the perfect idea that we are held to be? And the answer is, biblically at least, Christ. All right? We are held to be in the mind of God as a Christ. We're not there yet, but that's what we must begin to identify with. We have a Christ-like nature, okay? Paul said, the secret which has been hidden for ages and generations, which is Christ in you, your hope of glory. He talked about us being joint heirs with Christ, meaning all that Christ was heir to in his relationship with God, you and I are heir to. We're joint heirs, all right? He said, Paul said, let this mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus. Again, not saying you can't have that mind and heart and relationship. Christ modeled it. Christ brought it into full expression. We're not saying we're there yet, but that is the model, all right? And so we all know what the Trinity is, right? Right? Okay, the Trinity is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? Well, in metaphysics, we go beyond the literal, beyond the physical, and so it is actually a process. So you understand the way it's looked at metaphysically is the Father is basically the all-knowing mind of God, this universal intelligence that is everywhere, all right? And out of that universal intelligence, all-knowing mind, comes the perfect idea of man, woman, human, okay? And that is the Son. And how do you bring that perfect idea into expression? Well, it's through the movement of something called the Holy Spirit that you open up to. When you allow that Spirit to move and guide and direct you, it's a very personal movement of God's grace in and through you. In the all-knowing mind of God, the Father, is the Son, the perfect idea of you. And the Holy Spirit wants to bring that forth into full expression bit by bit as you grow and you give yourself to it. So we have to be willing to allow that, engage with it, and allow ourselves to hatch the idea of who we are and then begin to fly. So the perfect idea is this Christ. But we make a distinction, of course, and I've made this distinction before, and other scholars do as well, and that is that Jesus was the man and Christ was the principle, the ideal, all right? The perfect idea that was being expressed through the man, Jesus. And Jesus was able to say, I and the Father are one. He was able to say, I am in my Father, and my Father is in me. If you substitute out the word God, or substitute out Father and put it in there God, you're able to say, I am in my God, and my God is in me. It's very powerful, you see. He wants us to say that. He wants us to know that. That's why he said these things, to wake up to that. And so what is our transformation to be about, or what is it toward? It's toward becoming a Christ in expression, bit by bit. The Christ nature, okay? The divinity of God, this perfect idea, more peace, more love, more joy, more living of those principles that we're taught that are universal. And if we all accept what the Old Testament says, or the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, and the first book being Genesis, where if we accept that we are made in the image and after the likeness of God, then we all have that seed of God in us. That image and likeness is really the reference to the perfect idea that you're held to be, but then you're given free will. Okay? You can rise or fall depending on how you move the energies and manage the energies of life and live within the harmony of the laws and principles that we are seeking to expose you to. Transformation requires that we identify with a higher ideal, one's higher self, not defying or let's say not identifying with one's small self or ego self, limit ideas. I think, it's very, I find it can be for many people, and it was for me, and it's very difficult for people to conceive of themselves as a Christ. I mean, I know that we realize we're not there yet, but it's kind of like, really, But we don't have to swallow the elephant in one bite. Martin Luther King Jr., he said, take the first step in faith. You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step. And so what we're saying is the first step is to begin to identify. That's the word in that value. Identify with the idea that this is your truth. Begin to reflect on that. Most of all of us have been at an airport where we have seen or flown a 747 aircraft. And this airplane that weighs nearly 1 million pounds. Have you ever looked through the window of a terminal there where you're about to get on and you look out at the plane and you see this massive object and you think to yourself, this really seems impossible that thing is going to get off the ground and actually get into the air and fly like a bird? Give me a break, And so there's the part of our mind that argues with this as, this can't happen. Yet we get into that contraption, and that's 500 tons of steel flies and takes us to a destination. Really, it is amazing, isn't it? And that's why some people don't fly. They don't believe that 500 tons can, But it seems impossible. But, what I want to tell you is, the truth is, it has to fly. It has to fly because it depends on some universal principles and laws of aerodynamics that work and always work if you apply them. And once they were discovered, man was able to fly like a bird and move people across the country like that. And you can study and understand the whole dynamics of aerodynamics, and it's about the air pressure moving across the wing, and it gets lower on one side and higher on the other, and that creates a lift, and that the faster the plane is able to go down the runway, the stronger the pressure and the more the lift. And that 1 million pound 747 is able to get off the ground and fly. And it's the principles of aerodynamics that are applied. Seemingly the impossible becomes possible because of laws and principles that are applied. And even though our mind wants to defy our assessment that this is a miraculous feat that this thing is flying, but every aircraft uses the same principles and they work. It has to fly. Now, do you think, you with me? Do you think that the Boeing company that makes airplanes would design and create an aircraft not to fly? That'd be absurd, wouldn't it? Do you think the Creator who created humanity in his image and likeness, who held in mind the ideal man and what he was capable of doing and being, and who created the spiritual principles to be applied to do it, would create only one human being that could achieve it? One person who could fly, one person who could be a Christ, and that the rest were created not to fly, not to be a Christ, not to know and fulfill the ideal that they are held to be? It's very difficult for me, personally, to conceive of Jesus as one who came to earth and demonstrated flight. He demonstrated his divinity, only to say, you can never know this. You can never have this. You can never be this. You can't be like me. You can't know God the way I know God. I'm the only one. The truth is, he never said anything close to it. He was always calling us up higher, always. Jesus said, I say to you, he who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and greater works than these will he do. Does that sound like he's holding us back? Greater works. I remember speaking to a traditional minister one time, and I brought that verse up. And he said, yeah, I wish he had never said that. Really, I swear, it's a true conversation. So we value transformation because we believe Jesus did too. He taught that we could transform the world, really, if we applied these principles. We could bring heaven to earth. There was a Zen master who said to a monk, a student, said, do you see the universe in your cup? And the monk looked into his cup and didn't see the universe. So he threw the cup away. And the Zen master said, oh, poor cup. He went on to say, we think the cup is too small to hold the universe. Intellectually, we can't see how it could fit. But wherever we go, the whole universe always appears. In a cup, a window, in a smile, in a word, and in a person like you. St. Augustine said, people travel to wonder at the height of mountains, to wonder at the huge waves of the sea, to wonder at the long courses of rivers, the vast compass of the ocean, to wonder at the circular motion of the stars. And they bypass themselves without wondering. Wow. William Blake, he said, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is. Infinite. Infinite. What we're about is cleansing the doors of one's perception. That's what this value is about. Transforming your perception, beginning to identify with something high and more that has always been there. It takes time for an airplane to get off the ground, to get airborne. It takes time to lift one's consciousness as well. So you have to be patient with yourself. It doesn't happen overnight. Overday either. I must ask, is the ideal me, the Christ in me, somewhere else other than where I am right now? Or is the Christ ideal, the image and likeness of God, in which I was created, is that here, right now, part of me, within me? And am I just sleeping to the truth of my reality? Have I forgotten who I really am? Have I covered over the truth of who I am with various conditionings and ideas and beliefs that are far-fetched from the truth? Have I identified with the caterpillar and forgotten that I'm a butterfly, and that I'm built to fly? am I held in the mind of God to be a Christ? Would God the Creator create anything else less than that? Now, we're not saying that we're there. We're not saying we've arrived in expressing the fullness of the Christ. But by golly, let us know that the seed of the divine is in us. The Christ seed is in us. A flower seed needs to be in relationship with the soil and moisture, the same way that the seed of God in us needs to be in relationship with its source, and that's a part of it. An apple seed somehow knows its true identity from a pumpkin seed. So we must also have an expanding awareness of our true spiritual identity if we're to bring it into expression. We are threefold beings. We are physical, mental, spiritual. Which is the real me? Spiritual. Objects come and go. Thoughts come and go. Emotions come and go. What remains permanent? This spirit, this something in me that observes objects, can observe my thoughts, can observe my emotions. There is a witnessing presence, a witnessing self that has permanence. That's the divine you. Transformation begins to happen, and a shift in a person's life when they begin to identify with this divine witness, their true core seed essence. It takes you beyond ego. It takes you beyond unhealthy inner and outer attachments. It helps you release what needs to be released. It takes you into a new level of freedom. You begin to shed those things that are not true to your nature. All the good that God is wants to find expression in you. It wants to. And we have to upgrade our image of ourselves, what it is that we identify with, which means our identity. You know, we have to upgrade that. And we are a divine idea in the mind of God. And through a pure intention to open to it, through prayer, meditation, learning, uniting with a community like this and its teachings, going into the quiet, reflecting on the truth that this is who you are, you begin to move higher and you begin to move towards flight. You're not a Boeing 747, but you are a spiritual being. You're created by God and you're meant to fly spiritually higher, to be expressing the more that is inherently in you and in life to be lived. Our value states we bring into full expression the divine idea we are held to be in the mind of God through the expanding awareness of our spiritual identity. Affirm with me, I bring into full expression the idea I am held to be in the mind of God through the expanding awareness of my spiritual identity. Go be a light in the world. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. At Unity, we believe that God's presence of love and goodness is everywhere, and that life is meant to be good. You can find out more about Unity and our teachings at unityhouston.org.